So I'd like to give a short Dharma talk today, and what I wanted to share with you is kind of like my feeling, as a Buddhist, that the current emphasis, on this practice that's called social distancing. It seems a little ironic to me, So I understand, the clinical medical reasons for it, given the highly contagious nature of the coronavirus. So when I say, social distancing is somewhat ironic, it's because, as Buddhists, we're always encouraged to, we hear phrases like join together with others and, awaken to the oneness of all life. So when we hear those kinds of things and then kind of juxtapose it with, social distancing, social distancing seems to kind of go against the grain, so to speak, of not only of our Buddhist teachings, but, our natural need as human beings to kind of come together. And so, it feels really strange to me. I'm sure you probably agree. And then, I should admit that this, my admission of social distancing feeling strange, social distancing feeling strange is coming from someone, who, as my wife, Diane, likes to frequently remind me, someone who is already a little too introverted. So it is really strange. And I suppose the irony here might be that, it's because of this very fact of, our interconnectedness and interdependence as fellow human beings. It's because of that we're, actually all the more vulnerable to spreading this virus. So it's a very difficult situation to deal with. But so not to make light of this very serious pandemic that we're facing. I was recently reminded of a very popular, I guess you'd call it a meme, a social cultural meme that was very popular around 10 or 20 years ago, which you probably remember, which was Kevin Bacon's 6 Degrees of Separation. Do you remember that? So, not surprisingly, because of this the current warnings about, spreading the coronavirus, this idea of Kevin Bacon's 6 Degrees of Separation, the close connections we have with each other that we're not even aware of, this idea has, Kevin Bacon's, concept has recently resurfaced. And I saw a public service message by Kevin Bacon himself recently advising us all to stay home for someone we love. That was his message. And in Kevin's case, he said he's staying home for his wife, the fellow actor, Kira Sedgwick. And, I think Kevin was pointing out that because of our, interconnectedness, we should practice, home isolation in order to avoid, inadvertently, spreading the coronavirus. But the original reason why this concept of 6 degrees of separation went viral, excuse the expression, is because the legend according to the legend that I read, or the account that I read, on some talk show, Kevin had made the seemingly outrageous claim that he had been, he had appeared in so many movies and with so many other actors that he was, connected, so to speak, to any other actor by 6 degrees of separation or less. And so, like, for instance, if he was in a certain movie with actor A, and actor A was in another movie with actor B, then there were said to be 2 degrees of separation between that actor B and Kevin. Or to put it in Kevin's terminology, actor B had a Bacon number of 2. Now, there's some really crazy examples of Kevin's claim, and here's one that I personally checked out. So, I think some of you know, I've been preparing recently for my Star Wars seminar, which is called Buddhism and Star Wars: Finding Your Place in the Galaxy. And not surprising, it was unfortunately it had to be postponed due to the concerns that we have over the coronavirus. But hopefully I will either reschedule it at the temple, or maybe I'll present it online via the Zoom platform. But anyway, the central character of the Star Wars sequel trilogy is the British actress Daisy Ridley, who I'm sure most of you are familiar with. She plays Rey in the The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and then The Rise of Skywalker. She's very young, and so she's someone that you wouldn't think has a Kevin Bacon number, right? But it turns out she was in The Last Jedi with Laura Dern, and Laura Dern was in a 2001 movie called Novocaine with, you guessed it, Kevin Bacon. So Daisy Ridley's Bacon number is only 2. So talk about interconnectedness. But anyway, that's kind of a lighthearted example of interconnectedness. But getting back to the seeming irony that I mentioned earlier about Buddhists practicing social distancing, I should clarify that from the standpoint of the Buddha's teachings, the teaching of the Buddha, none of the difficulties that we're facing due to the current, pandemic are actually ironic at all. In fact, these are all just examples of the, what the Buddha taught as the impermanence and interdependence of everything, which is the core teaching of the Buddha. In the flow of constant change, all things are interrelated. All things are interdependent. Technically, the term is dependent arising. All things arise together in this constant flow. But okay, on the somewhat brighter side, I think maybe you've all heard the report. I heard this report yesterday. For the first time, there have been no new domestic cases reported in China. And so that's reason to be cautiously optimistic, I think. But at the same time, our public officials, I think, have said that that may be encouraging for China, but in the United States, the worst may be yet to come. I mean, it's hard to say, but we're maybe 3 to or more weeks behind the curve that China experienced, and that actually Italy is now experiencing. And so, that's why you also heard this phrase, we need to flatten the curve, meaning that we can't eliminate the virus right now, but we need to keep it under control. And that's why social distancing is important, to kind of lessen the number of people that need hospital care, so as to not overwhelm our hospitals. Anyway, so the new normal, I guess, is social distancing, right? And it's likely something that we'll have to live with for a while. And so there have been a lot of experts, talking, giving us advice on ways to cope with this new normal. And one thing is that one thing to keep in mind, I think, is that this increased stress, that we're all feeling is actually something kind of fundamentally built into our brain. Actually, it turns out. The other day at the temple, we were discussing the ideas of this best-selling author and neuropsychiatrist, Dr. Rick Hansen. He wrote this best-selling book called Buddha's Brain, which you should check out if you haven't read it. He says that humans actually have a 600 million year old negativity bias. We're programmed by evolution to pay more attention to threats than to things that make us happy, as Dr. Hansen points out in his book. So if 10 things happen to us while at school or while at work, and 9 of the things are positive, but only 1 is negative, the one that we're going to remember is the negative one, long after the positive ones. And so this kind of negativity bias is basically what helped us stay alive in the caves that we lived in prehistoric times. You wanted something good to eat for dinner, but you certainly better avoid being some bigger creature's dinner. But for modern people, I think, as Dr. Hansen has pointed out, many doctors have pointed out, this negativity bias actually has a side effect, which is, often we can be overwhelmed by anxiety. And so this is something that's, this negativity bias is something that's really no longer helpful in modern society. As far as, ways to reduce anxiety, I was just briefly mentioned that I lead the Wednesday night study class at the temple. We've also had mindfulness seminars at the temple. And so if you've participated in the Wednesday night study class or in our mindfulness seminars, you're probably familiar with the one of the practices that we do there, which is called anapanasati, which means mindfulness of the in and out breath. And this happens to be part of the Buddha's Eightfold Noble Path, which is, the fourth of the Four Noble Truths. Anapanasati, or mindfulness of the in and out breath, is a very simple practice. It's what it's basically designed to do is to bring our attention, our awareness into the present moment, instead of allowing it to become anxious about, our imagined future or becoming attached to something that happened in the past. The fundamental emphasis of the Buddha's teaching is to remain in the present moment. And so anapanasati, that's why anapanasati, or mindfulness of the breath, is part of the Eightfold Noble Path. This Wednesday night, this coming Wednesday, I will begin the Wednesday night study class with a session of anapanasati. I'll probably do it. Yeah, we'll definitely do it via the Zoom teleconferencing platform. But regarding this problem of fear and anxiety, I remember a statement that the Buddhist scholar, the late Dr. Luis Gomez, once made. Dr. Gomez once came to Higashi Honganji Buddhist Temple and gave a seminar, which I remember him making the statement that has stayed with me all these years. He emphasized the importance of being calm, and what Dr. Gomez said is, "You must be calm and serene. Being calm resolves all the paradoxes. Being calm is how you mirror others and mirror the Buddha. Being serene requires effort and practice, and yet in its actual expression, it must be spontaneous." Quite a profound statement, I think, and I'm still, thinking about what he meant by that. But my guess is that what he's saying is that, however we might, come to experience this calmness and serenity, because there are many practices, one of which might be meditation, for example. But however we come to experience it, this is an awareness that arises naturally within me. And so I think, in that sense, it might be the same thing as our Shin Buddhist teaching of Namu Amida Butsu, which Namu Amida Butsu means taking refuge in, or deeply hearing, or even being called to hear the Buddha's teaching of impermanence and interdependence. And this kind of awareness of the Dharma, of the reality, I think, is something that makes the these inevitable changes of life that we're experiencing right now a little bit more tolerable, I think, and allows our challenges to be acknowledged and our anxiety, lessened a little bit. And so, if you're interested in our Wednesday night study class, email me at the temple. The temple's email address is info@hhbt-la.org. info@hhbt-la.org. But then on the other hand, on a more down to earth kind of level, I also happened to read this particular psychologist saying that his strategy for coping with stress is, as he put it, just do something else. He was referring to shutting down the smartphone, turning off the news, and then engaging in any anxiety lessening method that works for you. So I think he did mention meditation, or he also mentioned any other calming activity like yoga or Tai Chi. But he also suggested trying to do things that are are, as he put it, pleasurable and satisfying. For instance, he said that now that we are all home isolating, it may be a good time to do tasks around the house we've been putting off, and that would make us feel happy to have accomplished. So, Diane, if you're listening, I will finally straighten out my bookcase, okay?
Okay.
Okay, she said okay. So, so for the foreseeable future, we all need to continue practicing social distancing, and this means, working from home, like I'm doing right now, as much as possible, and of course, staying away from crowds and people and keeping, that 6 feet of distance in public places. And then, of course, besides being diligent about washing our hands and not touching our face, this social distancing seems to be the most, promising behavior that we can do to slow down the spread of the virus. So practice this as much as possible. It's very important for your safety and for others' safety. It's, again, practicing this is actually an expression of interdependence and also, in a sense, compassionate action, according to the Buddha. But, even as you're practicing social distancing, please, do try to, stay connected with your friends, with family, and, of course, with our Higashi Honganji Sangha, through these live stream services and also through the temple's website and the temple's Facebook page. And, as I mentioned earlier, I'll be hosting the Wednesday night study class via the Zoom platform this coming week. And I think it goes without saying that as, human beings, we need each other's support now, more than ever, I think. And so please remember that even though we're, socially distant, as the Buddha taught, we're actually always interconnected and always together in the Dharma. So that's my message for today. So thank you for listening. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.